Coming back to word families again, you'll remember when we were talking about back as one of the first writing interventions. Well, here you can see another student who is using a word family. We've just done ache, and she's now writing the beginning of a story using that word family. So you can see how, even for students with significant disabilities, giving the foundational block of a word family actually allows children to excel in their writing skills because they now have so many more words that they know they can spell and read. To get more sophisticated, many students with and without disabilities struggle with some of the connecting words. I often refer to them as the sticky words that hold two sentences together, the conjunctions. And so I like to create real hands-on activities so that students can experience using different conjunctions to put two sentences together. Now you'll see that on the bottom of this image, you have while and until. I have found as an educator that these are the two trickiest, and especially for our English language learners. I admittedly still hear plenty of English language learners who are proficient in both languages switching these sometimes. But what I like to do is to talk about how these two words have something in common. It's that they both are talking about two events. Now, while is two events happening at the same time. And so I give a real visual cue with my arms. And you'll see those wavy lines on the bottom of the card. But until, it's two events, but one was happening until the other one stopped it. And using that kinesthetic experience of the words combined with the visual reminder on the card allows students to really understand those conjunctions in a much more authentic way. Another great writing intervention is to use wordless books, but say, hey, for example, Tommy DePaula wrote this amazing book that we all love and we're so familiar with. So again, the student knows the story, they've heard you tell the story, they've probably told it to themselves, so it's familiar. So what a great way to say, he is the illustrator, but he didn't write the words. Can we add you as his author? And then just add some lines onto the paper and have the student start writing the story. For our older students, when we get into longer essay writing, the organization of writing becomes so demanding. And so it's interesting because I created this graphic organizer for my students with IEPs in a third grade class, but I have to tell you that within minutes, all the students without disabilities wanted to see what this was, and so we quickly went to the office, made more copies, grabbed our highlighters, and created this template for everyone because we found it to be so effective, and then actually passed it on to the 4th through 8th graders in our building. So I hope that you'll consider using something like this, but it just uses something as simple as color to make the connection that when you're writing a 5-paragraph essay, if you look at this top left paper, this is your introduction paragraph. And so you do your topic sentence, and then you have these 3 main ideas before your concluding sentence. But what connection can be so clear through color, a lot of students often struggle with as they get to paragraphs 2, 3, 4, and 5. So just making a real connection that, hey, that first example that you used in your introduction is that orange example is going to turn into the whole topic for paragraph 2. And the main blue example that you used in your intro is going to be the whole paragraph 3, and so on. And so something as simple as using 3 highlighters allowed a full grade of students to master a 5-paragraph essay. Just a few more writing strategies to put in your bag of tricks. I think it's so wonderful to teach new strategies with engaging material. And so there's lots of great resources online to find content that students will be excited about. So if it's comparing and contrasting or writing a persuasive essay, let your students really be engaged and excited about the topic. Here you'll see 2 articles, they're both from Time for Kids, about the benefits and the downsides to video games. Well, you better believe that I had some really high quality persuasive essays that compared and contrast the pros and cons after using this content. And students have come back to me and said, you know, I think back to that essay years later because I actually was able to understand the art of persuasion and comparing and contrasting because I started with something that I actually enjoyed. So rather than asking students to persuade you to do something that they know nothing about, let's actually involve them in the topic selection. There are wonderful, wonderful books, children's literature that can be used to expand your young writers' minds. Here is an example of how we read Nothing Ever Happens on 90th Street, which was a great choice for my students who live in New York City because it was a setting that they could really relate to. And each character in the book helped the main character enhance his writing because there was one person who really liked to stretch the truth, and it taught my students that it's okay to exaggerate and add some hyperbole to your writing, where another character in the book, Mr. Sims, loved the details. And so I can now say to my students, I think you need a little bit more of Mr. Sims in your writing, or a little bit of Alexis Leora, and all of a sudden they really have a connection to what that means for their writing. I think that helping students to understand how complex English can be is powerful. Let's just acknowledge that there are so many exceptions. So even though we're teaching you the rule, there's going to be plenty of times when English just breaks that rule. And so with younger students, I like to use the words that, you know, some words follow a pattern where some are a little bit silly. And of course you can change that language for older students, but really just trying to outline for students those exceptions so that they know to expect them. So for example, we had already discussed, already happened, ED, but students need to know that that rule won't always apply. And I think it only frustrates kids when we don't tell them that, and then they try to write singed or bide and feel frustrated when they didn't get it right. So let's just talk about how, oh, that's one of those silly ones I was talking to you about. But how great that you applied the ED rule, because you're right. If it followed the pattern, you were exactly right in how to build it. But this is one of those silly ones, silly English, and working from there. Following those examples of how English can be a little bit silly, I like to do activities with my students to really start to understand even the patterns of the exceptions. And so going from singular to plural, here's just a chart that my students made and actually had to do a sort and then glue and create their own poster for reference in our classroom of when the F changes to VES or the double O changes to an EE instead of the traditional add an S. Thank you for letting me share some of the writing interventions that are in my bag of tricks. I hope you'll try some of them out with your students.